Hey everyone, this is GGN for Wednesday, November 13th, 2013. I'm going to cover the Middle East news, Syria, Iran, but also some Africa news, and also immigration, how that relates to Europeans and people in the United States. Because we bomb them and then they go usually to Europe and North America. So I'm going to try to track. Sweden closes 4 prisons as the number of inmates plummets. So I found this from Cryptagon.com, and I'll skip down to the Guardian article. Sweden has experienced such a sharp fall in the number of prison admissions in the past 2 years that it's decided to close down 4 prisons and remand a center. We've seen an out-of-the-ordinary decline in the number of inmates, says the head of Sweden's Prison and Probation Services. Now we have the opportunity to close down a part of our infrastructure that we don't need at this point in time. So this is important. That's all I really need to cover from that Guardian article, because of stuff like this. What's going on in multicultural utopia, Sweden and Norway, and other places as well. But in France, the guys, there's ethnic French that can barely even go into their apartment without getting basically surrounded by a mob of African immigrants and Muslim immigrants. Muslim immigrants get community service for gang rape of 12-year-old in Norway. So the thugs were convicted of aggravated rape, but the prosecutor only asked the court for community service for perpetrators. So they were collectively ordered to pay a fine and given community service. One of the perpetrators was also convicted of raping another 13-year-old victim. He was only ordered to pay a fine for that rape. So this is how justice is done in Sweden. So these racist and violent Muslim immigrants assaulting, police arson, and rioting. And the thing is they say that the police, I read an article about in Germany and in Sweden or Norway, one of them, where they were actually losing control because of the amount of immigrant populations wherever they're at. They just don't have the resources, and they say that it's because they don't have the funds to create more police stations. So this is what they're saying. So I would imagine and go on a limb that it's going to get a lot worse in Sweden and Norway as far as safety for Europeans and that, because they're saying that they don't have the money, and now they're saying that they're not that they're closing prisons because they're not actually incarcerating people that should be. And it was kind of weird the way Cryptagon covered this, because they were actually pointing or highlighting the U.S. incarceration rate being the highest in the world, which is true, and it sucks because many of them are nonviolent offenders. But they're missing the point, right? They're not doing that. They're not closing prisons because there's not enough people that should be incarcerated. It's because they either A, are just willfully not doing it, or B, they don't have the money to take care of all of the immigrants. It says here, North Carolina man has been charged with trying to join Al-Qaeda in Syria. The Pakistani native had an online relationship with undercover FBI worker. He was on his way to Lebanon to join an Al-Qaeda-linked group, and he was arrested by federal prosecutors. He spent 5 months posting material on Facebook backing jihadis opposing the Syrian regime. His father says there's no truth in the allegations. So we know they're infamous for the sting operations, but we've also covered this extensively, about these jihadists actually going back to countries in Europe and the U.S. As son heads to Syrian front of family in Germany plots kidnapping to bring him back. So they're going to try to kidnap their son to bring him back to Germany. In Saudi Arabia, they're earmarking $300 million to the so-called Syria transitional government. We're talking about Saudi Arabia getting kicked aside, possibly. Could be destabilized here in the near future. They reported earmarked U.S. dollars of $300 million financing the so-called transitional government for Syria, which is planned to be set up by foreign-sponsored opposition. Then you have pro-Syrian Lebanese Sunni cleric shot dead in Tripoli. This is not the first time that this has happened. This has happened before, where I believe it was in even Lebanon again, but it could have been in Syria, where it was a Sunni cleric that was trying to get peace talks between these guys, between these groups and factions, Shiites, Sunnis, and all that, and he was assassinated by Sunnis. At least they call themselves Sunni Salafists and that. But a Lebanese Sunni Muslim cleric whose group is allied to Syria's government has been killed in the northern city of Tripoli. Now, it's important to note, because we were talking about just recently about these, Saudi Arabia does go, kingdom does fall, whatever. You could see a swarm of these Salafists that was kind of originated from there, and it will actually go back to Saudi Arabia, and you'll see like an Iraqi, Syrian type, Libya really type scenario there playing out. So we're talking about them going to Europe and the U.S. They'd also go there. Al Qaeda in Syria has raided a wedding party. They warned against music and singing. And of course, yeah, they're setting up Sharia law, I guess. So one of the residents said if a music band is invited to a wedding again, the person responsible will be arrested because this is immoral. Moving on, propaganda alert. The Times, I'm not sure which one it is here, but it says here mainstream media sinks to new depths, saying that Assad snipers target unborn babies in wombs. So despite a worldwide awakening on the scale of the long-standing propaganda against the Syrian government, the British media is still peddling monstrous lies to the public, casually blaming or placing the blame on the government of Bashar al-Assad. Assad snipers target unborn babies in wombs. So, oh wow, so gunmen aim at women's stomach and shooting game for cigarettes. So this is the first time I've seen this. I was going to cover that because that was actually covered by Al-Manar out of Lebanon. Snipers in Syria target pregnant bellies in exchange for packs of cigarettes. So, but as far as the original article, I don't know if it says this in there in the Times, but it says here the British doctor that was over there, this is what it's based off, this whole story, said that the snipers were mercenaries who came from far countries to fight in Syria. So these snipers, these guys were probably trained, and you wonder who trains them. Well, just recently, remember the first, these rebels were being trained by the CIA down there in Jordan. First Syria rebels armed and trained by CIA on the way to battlefield. The first cell of these terrorists trained and armed by the agency is making its way to the battlefield, says Obama. Yeah, this was on September of this year. The IAEA is ready to verify any nuclear deal with Iran. So the inspectors are going to confirm implementation of any pact. Fresh off of signing their own cooperation deal with Iran, the International Atomic Energy Agency's chief confirmed the agency's willingness to help with the implementation of any deal between Iran and the P5+1. Pretty interesting, because Iran hasn't changed anything. They're still doing the same thing that they've been doing, and all of a sudden they're oh yeah, okay, yeah, they've changed. But like I said, I think there's something that they're trying to get from Iran, some kind of financial stability for the Western system that they're going to try to suck out of this. New Iran sanctions would risk a war, says White House. They said that on Tuesday, tightening sanctions on Iran could box America into a march to war and derail a diplomatic push to reach an agreement with Tehran's nuclear program. Kerry to warn U.S. Senate of new Iran sanctions. He urges skeptical U.S. lawmakers to not proceed with the new sanctions aimed at halting Iran's nuclear drive. So there you go. You tell us something doesn't smell right. I made a video recently about assassinations in Iran and terrorism in China. It's something that I noticed, the trend going on here recently in the last month. And then you have this, Iran's deputy minister has been assassinated November 10th. The Iran deputy minister of Industry, Mines, and Commerce was assassinated on November 10th. Unidentified men shot at him when he was in his personal car in Tehran. But another story, an article posted, says that they caught the man, and they said that it was actually personal and it wasn't political. But, I mean, if it was political, would they really admit it? The problem with countries like Iran or North Korea or other things, Libya, is that they try to deal with these countries, the Western countries, who are ready to bomb them at any time, and they tend to kind of puff up their, what they are able to do. They inflate their capabilities, and it actually looks good at home, makes them seem like they're strong, but overseas they can turn and twist that around on them to their own people as propaganda, saying that they're going to come attack Americans. I remember where the chemical weapons were going to go, the disposal of the chemical weapons, where they're going to send them. Norway said, no, we don't think so. And we were talking about Albania. Well, look at, they've responded. Albanians protest effort to make Syria chemical weapons disposal their problem. The protesters marched on U.S. Embassy condemning the proposal. Also, yeah, I forgot about that. Lebanon also said no. The theme was, when they were marching on their banners, was "Yes, we can say no." So they said here that the undertaking was a matter of sovereignty and not something the international community ought to simply throw Albania's way. But the prime minister says basically he was in talks. They didn't confirm a plan yet, but it says here his hope was to get his nation into the EU. So it could mean pleasing Western nations will trump local wishes. So kind of like with Turkey, hating terrorists and that to try to get in there. But Turkey is also responsible for closing their borders purposefully and allowing these refugees from Syria to flow into Bulgaria so they can handle them. Bulgarians are protesting the Syrian refugee invasion from Turkey. And actually, I just saw this article today from the 12th. Students tried to blockade Bulgaria's parliament. 5 have been detained. October 2nd, Bulgarian refugee chief has been fired amid Syrian influx. These protesters in Bulgaria said, "We want to stay in Bulgaria and live with dignity. We know that for this to happen, something has to change and this government has to go." So they want to stay, unlike other people who just leave, like Tina Turner relinquishing her U.S. citizenship, declaring that she no longer has any strong ties to the U.S. And Somalia has a lot of refugees, and that's part of it besides resources. But UN Security Council okays African troop surge in Somalia to break al-Shabaab, which they probably won't do. But it says here they authorized 4,400 more, which makes it 22,000 troops in total for the AU soldiers. They called for massive UN assistance. Here, this is what you have in the U.S. from November 7th. Somali wins Minneapolis City Council seat. And when they're here, Somalis filed discrimination complaints over prayer in the workplace. I'll come back to this at the end here in the last couple of minutes. All these riots that were going on in Sweden earlier this year, it was actually questioning multiculturalism. See this article from the LA Times, the U.S. Army discovers Africa. They start out by saying on a list of U.S. military priorities, Africa has always been ranked at the bottom, but now appears to be changing. Thousands of soldiers once bound for Iraq and Afghanistan are now gearing up for missions to Africa. They're talking about, are they going to bring 1 million American soldiers? They say it's doubtful. That's why they're going to bring small special forces type and train them, bring in the UN. Here you have the new model armies. Why are Western forces being deployed across Africa from the independent of the UK? The new mantra, muscular soft power, is designed to fight insurgencies, and that's the ones that these people fund, these mercenaries, not the rebels, mind you, that want the resources. And they prepare states to defend themselves against these rebels who are trying to look out for their people, while building up infrastructure and civic institutions like schools and doctors and all that to brainwash them and make money off them. Oh, look at this from today. U.S. blacklists Nigeria's Boko Haram as terror group. Kind of like in Libya, we just covered the story about a bunch of cash and money being found. That's going to the terrorists that are going to Syria, kind of like rock stacks of cash found. Greece intercepts mystery ship with 20,000 Kalashnikovs on board. Wonder where they're heading. But as far as resources goes, there's minerals and rare minerals stuff for gadgets, tech gadgets. But as far as oil goes, U.S. expected soon to be crowned world's oil king, which is why they'd be done with Saudi Arabia. But there is an agenda here to bomb places and create refugees and mix the cultures up, really to destroy the cultures, mix the races up. It says here, except for the people all the way at the top, European countries need to come to terms with their multicultural identity from November 5th. They've actually diagnosed it or come up with a diagnosis. If you don't want to have this happen to you and your people destroyed, they call it xenophobia. Then you have this, Jews play a leading role in promoting multiculturalism in Europe. This is actually coming from a government-funded Jewish group in Sweden, saying that Jews will have a leading role in multiculturalism. It says that there will be a resurgence of anti-Semitism because the people haven't learned to be multicultural in Europe. Now, we're talking about ethnic Europeans? No, we're talking about the immigrants who just got there. They're Muslims. So they created this monster. Now look at this. Anti-Semitism in Sweden forces Jews to question their future perpetrators, primarily Muslim immigrants. Talking about the riots in Sweden, right? It says here on Israeli TV, Jews must flee multicultural Europe. They were the leaders of the fight for open borders. Now they're heading to the U.S. And it seems the only time whites are attacked and is covered in the media as a hate crime is when it's against Jews. NYPD is probing attacks on Jews as hate crimes. And only a Jew like this Richard Cohn from the Washington Post can be openly against interracial marriage and it not be considered hate crime but a gag reflex. Thank you.